Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have a busy program today. The program today, we're going to have Susie Moore with CBRE give an overview of the office market research report, after which we're going to have a panel of experts up here with a Q&A session. We're going to lead off with some questions that we've prepared and then open it up to the audience for further questions. So thanks again for being here this morning. First, I'd like to acknowledge our breakfast sponsor, Ken Morris with Merrill Lynch.
I wish I could say this is a great marketing strategy, but I just wanted a better breakfast. So I volunteered to sponsor it if they would provide us with a better breakfast. So hopefully some other firms will step up for subsequent quarterly meetings and also provide us with a better breakfast. But I'm a certified financial planner, chartered financial analyst. So when you guys eventually do diversify away from real estate or you say those cap rates are just too damn low, I'll be there and I'd like to compete and earn your business. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Matt Thrasher with Thrasher Law Offices. He's going to give us an update on sponsorship opportunities.
Hello, Jim Marion and myself are with the sponsorship committee of the Research Council Board. Just wanted to let you guys know we will be sending out some flyers. We would like to request that you keep us in mind for sponsorships, especially as we're going into the next year. I know a lot of your companies are probably budgeting for sponsorships and other nonprofit donations, so definitely keep the Research Council in mind. As Mike mentioned, I think the thing that distinguishes the Research Council from some of the other groups in Tucson is we've got really great original content twice a year, a very in-depth original research report. The other two meetings a year, we always have great panelists on up-to-date topics, current things that are going on in Southern Arizona. And then the other thing is the quality of the audience. So a sponsorship with PCRERC is going to get you guys in front of, look around, all the premier brokerage houses in town, developers, accounting firms, law firms, appraisal firms, et cetera. So I think there's a real opportunity to do some sponsorships here. We're going to have sponsorships of the quarterly reports, meeting sponsorships, even down to like the breakfast sponsorship that Ken graciously picked up for this meeting. So again, Jim and I will be reaching out to a few of you with some of the different options, and I would just ask that you keep us in mind moving into next year.
So that is a nice segue into the piece of paper you will find on your tables. This is the 2018 annual membership invoice. We hope you will continue your membership with our organization and you find our content valuable. If you can think of anybody else that might benefit from the information we provide, please let us know and we will reach out to them. I wanted to point out that we are keeping membership dues the same as we did last year. Individual memberships at $300, corporate memberships $1,200 for the year, which entitles 5 people to attend the meetings. And I want to remind you that with your membership, you exclusively get the 2 annual research reports and then our 2 quarterly meetings. I think it's one of the best bargains out there, and we hope to see you again next year. So look for an email. And if you are so inclined, feel free to go ahead and fill out the form now. And again, we'd like to see you again in 2018. You'll also be receiving in the next couple of weeks an email with a survey asking you to do just that. Give us some feedback on how we're doing and suggestions for going forward. Now, I know a lot of times these emails get ignored or they're at the bottom of your list, so if you don't respond, you can expect a call from one of our board members asking you to do so. It's very important for us as a board to know how we're doing and what we can do better. So thank you for paying attention to that. Look for that email in the upcoming weeks. Next, I'd like to introduce Paul Kraft from the Clover Company. He's going to go over our quarterly snapshot on the market and then kick off our program.
So I chair the research committee, and I try to think of a slogan as to describe what we do, and I can only say that we're kind of geeky about data. On the table, the research committee is tasked with 2 things. One of them is the market snapshot. We produce this every quarter, and the other task is to produce an in-depth market study, which we're going to get into next. First of all, though, is on the table is a market snapshot, and I encourage you to take a look at this. As I looked at it, there was just 2 things I thought worth noteworthy in here. When we look at the industrial market, the question to ask is if Tucson wants to grow industrial-based jobs, and we have an 8% vacancy rate in the industrial market, and we know from the industrial report that we did a little over a year ago that a lot of that inventory is old and functionally obsolete. How do we attract jobs when our vacancy rate is that low? And there's a little bit of that seasoning in the office market report that Susie's going to go over later. The second thing in the market snapshot was of interest to me is, although you hear the multifamily market in some areas of the country is getting a little oversupplied and the rent growth has slowed, it hasn't gone negative. The rent growth is the opposite in Tucson. Year over year, we've accelerated, and the rent growth for multifamily is almost at 5% on a year-over-year basis. That's pretty strong. And the other thing is, so are we oversupplied in multifamily? And when you look at this, we have 0.07% under construction relative to the inventory stock. And as anybody in multifamily knows, that's below average. The jury's out as to whether we're producing too much of the same product in the same location, but on a quick look, it looks pretty healthy. So that's the market snapshot. So as I mentioned, we are a research committee. I'd like to introduce the Geek Squad: Drew Sanderford, Ross McAllister, Sarah Baker, Paul Hooker, Byron Bridges, and Jesse Bloom. Okay, so now for our feature presentation. Susie is a graduate of Cal State University. She moved to Tucson in 2013. She did her undergraduate work at BYU. She is going to earn her appraisal MAI designation, which is a very, very significant designation for an appraiser next year. And she and I have worked together the last several months. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you, Susie. You've been a delight. I'm excited about your presentation, and I will let you take over from here.
I just want to take a minute to thank everyone that I called. Probably about 15 to 20 people I spent upwards of half an hour on the phone with, gathering information for this report, so thank you. Also, by way of bio, one thing we don't mention because it's not wildly professionally applicable, I did teach a classroom full of high school freshmen for 2 years, 5 days a week at 6:30 in the morning. So I am well equipped to keep you awake. Hopefully it won't come to that, but if it does, Michael Latch asked me to prepare an interpretive dance. He thinks he was kidding. I will do it. So let's get started. The office market study. Let's talk about why Tucson is great. We're gonna start on a high note. Okay, here we go. Tucson strengths. We have great weather, unless it's August, right? Beautiful, beautiful place to live. No natural disasters. We don't deal with earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes. Thank heavens, right? These are great appeals for Tucson. It's ideal for an outdoor lifestyle. We've got hiking, backpacking, camping, etc. I'm preaching to the choir here. It's a great place. There's also the low cost of living to consider here in Tucson, which we hope would be a draw for potential businesses who are looking to locate here. The revitalized downtown area is a big draw. Since Sunlink came in starting in 2014, we've really seen a lot of growth and development in downtown. And we'll get a little more detailed into that later on. The University of Arizona provides us with a decent employment pool. We've got a lot of students in this town. Potential businesses could really tap into that resource and pull students fresh out of the university for business here in Tucson. We also have a high concentration of bilingual employees, which is great for call centers, which we have a lot of. Again, we'll go into a little bit of detail about call centers later on. But the bilingual population is really helpful. Then in terms of medical, we do have a lot of retirees. An older population here in Tucson drives the need for medical uses, so it's a great place for that. Now the sad side. Are we ready? We love Tucson. It has weaknesses. First of which, there is a limited availability of high-quality office space here. What we consider Class A is not typically Class A in other markets, okay? So we love One South Church. One South Church was built in 1986. It's over 30 years old, okay? So there's the quality is a little bit lower here as compared to other markets. And then also there's limited education in the employment pool, which is interesting because on the strength side, we see that we can tap into the university resource. But then on the weakness side, people are mentioning that we don't have a really high level of education. We're a great employment pool for call centers. Call centers don't require graduate degrees, right? So the general feel within the marketplace as I'm surveying people is that people come here to go to school, Tucson's beautiful, we love it, but the job pool isn't deep enough to stay here. People leave, and then they come back after they've retired. So working age residents in Tucson tend to have a lower education level, which is hurtful for potential businesses looking to come here. Poor school systems. We are in an impoverished area. We have a limited amount of large companies. Several people expressed this. There's a concern over, if you move here for Raytheon, where is your spouse or significant other going to work? If you move here for Raytheon and decide you hate Raytheon, where are you going to work without relocating? I'm sure I'm not the only person in this room who knows one or two people who would love to leave Raytheon, but can't unless they go to Phoenix or Colorado, et cetera. So we have our few good companies, great, we just don't have enough. We have poor infrastructure, including poor quality roadways, which I thought of as I was driving north on Tucson Boulevard to this meeting. Tucson Boulevard's the worst, right? Anyhow, sorry, little anecdote. Some people are concerned about this. Other people don't think this is a big deal. Maybe this is just a Tucson gripe. We're tired of driving through potholes. Does it really deter potential business from coming here and moving into downtown? Maybe, maybe not. Some people mention it. Other people don't think it's that big of a deal. I thought it was a big deal this morning, but that's just me getting tired of poor infrastructure. We do also have a limited number of direct flights from Tucson. This is changing. Yay for our direct flight to JFK. Hopefully that will continue, okay? But that is a potential business deterrent. So let's go back to what we consider Class A office space. I'm going to define what Class A means in Tucson, not the rest of the world. Class A office. Class A would be a good quality and well-maintained building. Again, you'll notice age of development is not quite so important as the maintenance. Clean lines, high ceilings, we want 9 feet and over. Open floor plans, this has become a big deal in the last decade or so. Fewer individual offices, more open space with natural lighting coming through. For medical buildings, age does matter. We want more updated technology. For this reason, we're seeing the smaller medical buildings built in the 70s and 80s are being used by what we might call alternative medical uses, men's health, laser hair removal, that kind of stuff. So this is specific to medical office, obviously. Sufficient parking, this is a hot spot. We need anywhere from 5 to 8 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet of building area, depending on the use. The higher end of the range going towards our call center, which is a big deal. So here are our buildings. One South Church, built in '86, beautiful building, 30 years old. Williams Center, built between '87 and '01, I think. La Paloma Corporate Center, hold on, I need to refer to my notes on this one. '84 to '09, and I think the '09 portion of La Paloma was the urgent care, I think. I'm pretty sure on that. So, thank you. Confirmation from Montiel. So we do have older product, but nice product, right? I mean, One South Church, clean lines, high ceilings, lots of windows, natural light. Morgan Stanley, beautiful building. That one's a newer development, 2015, built specifically for them. And then our last two are medical specific and are newer buildings because the higher technology matters. 08 for St. Joseph's Medical Plaza, and the orthopedic surgery center picture there is actually a sketch because I didn't get up there to take a real picture. It is, we've gone vertical. Are we totally done with the inside or are we still doing TIs in there? Still doing TIs on the inside, but orthopedic surgery center is standing. So again, this is our Class A. This is not Class A in San Francisco and New York. One broker may have mentioned to me he feels it's a deterrent to market this space as Class A space and has had the experience of bringing people in from out of town saying, let me show you our new Class A or our Class A space, and the comment coming back from the potential tenant is, you think this is Class A? It's a marketing nightmare to tell someone we don't have Class A space, but I'll just leave that into the hands of the brokers, whether or not we want to claim that we have Class A space when people coming in from other markets look at this and say, it's probably not the same standard as the rest of the country. Are we still friends? Okay, good. Let's move on. Okay, let's talk about downtown. Now that I've made you sad about Class A, let's talk about the good stuff. Downtown revitalization, right? We love to talk about downtown, and downtown is doing really well. The Sunlink streetcar that came into 2014, based on some quick research that I did, about $200 million of private investment and another $1 billion of investment. That's great. Lots of new businesses open downtown. What's interesting about the downtown revitalization is that it has really been a catalyst for retail and residential development. Lots of new retail residential, still having new retail residential development. Not so much on the office side. Our one Class A building downtown, again, was built in '86, and there is a vacant pad next door to that building waiting to be built. So, yay downtown, it's been a little bit more on the retail residential side. Businesses are still deterred from the downtown area. This is interesting to me. I lived in Los Angeles for a little while, so parking is just part of the game of going to work, right? Try to get lucky if you can. But the report is that businesses are still deterred from downtown because it's difficult to park and people don't like dealing with one-way streets. In my opinion, this is Susie Moore speaking, this is just a small town attitude and perception of downtown. I lived in Sacramento for a while as well. I had a friend who refused to pay for the parking garage and would go out and move her car every 2 hours. I think that's ridiculous, but it's just kind of what you deal with when you work in downtown at Sacramento. If you work downtown in LA, you just kind of pay for parking. Yeah, it stinks, but you deal with it. But here in Tucson, we're not willing to deal with that. Does that make sense what I'm saying? We do have low vacancy, office vacancy downtown. Part of this is helped by the fact that we have a lot of government buildings. There's also a really high concentration of owner-user buildings downtown, which I thought was really interesting. Let me give you some figures here. For all the number geeks out there, hopefully I'm not the only one. About 177 out of the 344 office buildings downtown are owner-user properties. On a per square foot basis, we're about 2.5 million. 48% of our supply is dedicated to owner-user properties, which is a lot. Our current office, there it is, 6.4% vacancy. I did pull a lot of data for this report about 3-4 months ago. So as of 3 months ago or so, we were about 6.4% office vacancy in downtown. Just for my own curiosity and giggles sakes, what I did is I pulled all the larger multi-tenant buildings. I grabbed everything that was over 100,000 square feet multi-tenant. So One South Church, Transamerica, Pioneer, et cetera, okay? Within those buildings, and non-government as well. Within those multi-tenant investment buildings, we're running an occupancy or a vacancy rate, of about 21.5%. I saw a couple people sigh. This is an overly punitive number because when we look at a submarket, generally we are taking into consideration owner-user, single-tenant, as well as multi-tenant, but still, in our biggest, nicest properties in downtown, we are running a vacancy of over 20%, and we need to be down closer to 10% before we start building spec and higher rents, but we'll get to that. Okay, so here's this little chart makes me happy. See our vacancy rate just tank? It's great. We were up over 11%, down here below 6% for a little while. This is because Sunlink came in right here in 2014, and we have all this preparation work before Sunlink comes in. So despite my negative ninny about how it's primarily retail residential, it has helped office. We may not be developing a whole lot of new, but it has helped with some vacancy. Just in case you're wondering, this huge delivery right here is the 320,000 square foot Pima County Courthouse. So that also helped with occupancy. When you deliver 320,000 square feet and immediately absorb it, that's good for a dropping vacancy rate. Oh, and that Pima County Courthouse development counts for approximately 40% of all development over the last 10 years. It's a huge chunk of the new product. So let's look at some other submarkets. Within the report, I go through the different submarkets because I taught teenagers at 6:30 in the morning. I know that you don't want me to go through every single submarket. I have 4 hours, right? Okay, good. So let's just look at a little brief outline here. Our biggest submarket by a long shot is Central Tucson, over 9.5 million, counts for 37% of all of the office supply throughout the entire market, which is great. Don't pay attention to Ajo, West Outlying Pima. That's such a small market. This is based on CoStar data that reflects asking rates. So that $6 rent is for the one space that might be, when I did my averages, I scrapped Ajo, Outlying County, West Outlying Pima County, because it just really skewed my numbers. So let's look at what those are. Again, Central Tucson is the largest, 32% or 37%. Rental rates, excluding Ajo. Our average rental rate is about $17.80 per square foot on a full service gross basis, okay? The highest is the Foothills at $21.62. This is not the highest rent anywhere. This is the highest submarket average rent or average asking rent per CoStar. The lowest is Southwest Tucson at $11.81, okay? Occupancy rates, again, excluding Ajo, we're averaging about 90%, which isn't really horrible. Actually, 90% is about the benchmark where you start building spec. Unfortunately, we don't have the rental rates, and again, we'll get to that. Our highest is Southwest Tucson, which also happens to be the lowest rental rate. These things coincide. And then the lowest is East Tucson. So let's talk a little bit about demand. So within a typical office market, demand is usually based on population, and population drives demand for office space. I found in my study the cart's in front of the horse a little bit here in Tucson. A lot of times we bring business in and population follows, okay? So we'll look at a little bit of demand studies. For me, it isn't wildly applicable to our market. I want to take a sidebar really quick. Check out this little number here. So at the very bottom here, we have percent college graduates. Pima County is actually doing pretty well in number of college graduates as compared to the state and the country. But again, these numbers do not account for how many of those college graduates are now retired and no longer working in the workforce, okay? That's just a little side note. So our growth is a little bit slower. Historically, we're at about 0.7. Arizona's just doing really well, and the US is at 0.8. So we're a little slower. And a lot of this is business driven. Let's look at this next one. There were some reports from market participants that we had less business jobs, less office jobs than we do retail jobs. And I'm not saying that's untrue because this is not super categorized very well. It's pretty broad. But comparatively speaking, according to this chart, we're about even with Arizona as a whole and the USA. And again, this may be just a function of capturing categories that are a little bit too broad. So, there that is. But in terms of figuring out future demand, a typical fundamental market analysis would include population growth and square foot per employee, and as the population grows, how many more square feet are we going to need? Again, this market's a little bit backwards. So I actually did a much simpler quick and dirty kind of growth rate. Here is our annual growth historically over the last 10 years-ish. We average about 0.9% increase in office product per year over the last 10 years, okay? So our grand total at the end of 5 years, if we continue on the same path at the same pace as we are right now, we're looking at just under 1.2 million square feet in product coming into the market over the next 5 years or so. Caterpillar is probably going to help boost that a little bit in the next year. And we'll see how it pans out after that. Let's look at market activity. We're going to get happy again, okay? Back to good news. Comcast Cable, this is a win. I include this one in recent construction because CoStar previously designated it as retail space and is now designating it as office space. It does show as an increase to supply. Also, they did a really significant renovation. So we've got over 200,000 square feet to Comcast Cable. This is just a really cool development, an instance in which we didn't have the supply, which is an issue. We have a lot of people mention that we don't have large enough floor plates to bring in big company. Reimagining retail space is an option for people who are looking not to build from the ground up. That being said, this is a win, and a lot of people I spoke to mentioned that this isn't the way a lot of people want to do it. People aren't, office users aren't interested in retail space. This one was, that's a win. Maybe we can find others. What else do I want to note? Oh yeah, the St. Joseph's Medical and the St. Mary's, these are both associated with hospitals, so we've got some medical office going in associated with hospitals, which is great. This notable recent construction is everything over 15,000 square feet. So we're not capturing the 5,000 square foot buildings being built in corporate center for owner-user business, okay? These are just the big ones. Build-to-suit is about 64%. This is a really strong build-to-suit market. We're not building spec, okay? The hospital-associated developments counts for over 18%. Multi-tenant, 17.7. We are less than 20% building spec or for multiple tenants, okay? It's just not that market that we're in right now. Proposed construction. This is an ugly chart. You're not really meant to read it. It's meant to look a little ominous. The number here at the bottom that you can't see, right there, 1.187. So just under 1.2 million, CoStar lists as proposed construction. For the most part, these are projects that have been in the pipeline for several years, and we're waiting for the right owner, the right tenant to come along and require development, okay? When we look at actual construction, this was actually really interesting to me. I didn't realize this. I had a third party pull permits versus deliveries for me. Over the last, 6 years, deliveries have matched exactly with permits that are pulled. This is indicative of an owner-user/build-to-suit market. People are not pulling permits and then having projects go defunct because people are not willing, or I shouldn't say willing, that's horrible. We're not in a strong enough market to justify pulling permits for a project that may or may not move forward. Not a spec market. The discrepancy in 2017 at the end there is simply because not everything's been built yet. But permits that are being pulled are being built. On a side note, one thing that didn't end up in this chart, because again, I pulled it about 3 years ago, 3 months ago, are we awake? Is the Caterpillar deal. So I think probably most, if not all of us, are aware of what's going on with Caterpillar. This was a big win for our market. Earlier this year, they come and they announced they're going to build a new building, 200,000 square feet. They're bringing in 600 jobs to the market. Hundreds of those are reported to be six-figure salaries. This is great news. What's interesting is they moved into the market into 2 separate spaces downtown while they're waiting for their building to be constructed. We don't have the space to put them all together because we don't have existing inventory. But we did find a deal where we were able to bring them into the market early, and they're willing to wait until their building is ready for them in 2 years' time. Buzz, who's not here, he was nice enough to pull some recent information. There was a report sent out on November 3rd, apparently. Rio Nuevo District granted $19 million to this project, and they have finished their site work and are ready to go vertical. So that's coming into the market, and that's a huge win. Again, when I'm talking to market participants about this, we're yay Caterpillar, except no one else wants to do it this way. It's the same deal as the Comcast building. Good for us, that's a win. No one wants to take retail space. Good for us, Caterpillar is a win, but how many companies really want to come into a market where their building is 2 years out from actually being developed? So, are we friends? Okay. It's just a little little hurdle to get over there to find the right companies who want this space. Okay, here's just our corporate centers because I cut them out. We have 41 lots available, buildings up to 40,000 square feet, ready to break ground. This is just corporate centers. We do have larger pieces of land for big multi-tenant buildings when the time is right. We've got a chunk of land at Williams Center. We have the pad right next to One South Church. We have land available for development. We're just waiting for the market to be right. Here are some executed leases. This is where the news gets good again. Call centers. This is fabulous. We have a lot of call center business here in the market, and I'm about to get to that. What I want to point out on this slide is our highest rent, right there, third line down, $29.13. We are just under $30. Oh, and in this chart, when you read the report, a lot of these expense structures flip between triple net and full service basis for our numbers people. So in order to adjust triple net leases up to a full service, I tacked on about $9 in expenses, which might be a little heavy, but for a newer building is probably about right. So $29.13, full service basis. That's a great lease. The rest of them, low to mid-20s, right? Even some high teens. Then we have some general office. Oh, this is a win right here, the Raytheon building expanding. Great. So glad to hear that Raytheon is expanding. That's fabulous. We do have a lot of government buildings, a couple DES buildings with decent rents. The FBI regional headquarters makes us super happy because it's $39, almost $40. There is a substantial amount of TIs wrapped into this rent, so cool your heels. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. But yay, almost $40. So other than the FBI headquarters, every other lease rate falls below $30 per square foot. Most of them are in low to mid-20s, okay? In fact, our average rental rate is $25.43. This number is skewed a little bit by the FBI lease at $39, okay? 1.3 million square feet leased. This is the last 5 years? Yeah, last 5 years. Let's talk about call centers. Are we ready to get happy again? Okay. Call centers, 777,000 square feet. This counts for almost 60% of the total supply leased. And again, these are big leases, right? I'm doing, I think it's 15 and above. Nope, 20 and above. 20,000 square feet and above, 60% of that accounts for call centers. This is a great call center market. Our average rent is almost $22. Let's talk about call centers for a minute, because it's one of the happy points that we have. If I find it, okay. We have a great labor pool for call centers. Part of that is just population. Another part of that is we have a largely bilingual population. This is really attractive for call center space. Also, we have low costs. So if you're dealing with companies who are consolidating resources into a call center, low cost is key, because they're doing this in order to save money, right? So the call center is changing a little bit. We do have, okay, it used to be a third party organization that would run call centers for a lot of companies. What's happening is a lot of companies are taking the call center operations in-house in order to eliminate that overhead cost. So wages are going higher for call center employees, costs are going down for companies, and we're also seeing call center quality improve, because what's happening is those employees will start at a third-party call center, and then once they have the experience, move to an in-house call center where they can make more money. So the call center thing is improving and becoming a more prominent part of our market. What's even cooler about this, yay, I want to see smiles, guys. Okay. This is only office space. I'm not even looking at industrial space that has gone for call center activity. There's a lot of it. What drives an employer to decide between industrial and office space, first and foremost, is parking. Parking is what I get from everyone. Call centers require 7 to 8 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So if that's in an industrial building that they have to hollow out and renovate, they'll do it. If it's at a retail building up at Tucson Mall that Comcast wants to come and renovate, they'll do it because the parking is there. That's absolutely number one. Number two is location with the employment pool. When I was talking to some of our more seasoned market participants. There's this idea that employers used to feel like you're lucky to have a job. So good for you, you've got a job, you'll drive to where the job is. That is kind of dying down with the rising generation. We are catering a little bit more to the employment pool. So instead of throwing everything down by the airport where it's cheaper, a lot of call centers want to be where the population is. So that may be office space in central Tucson, where you have a lot more people. Also, nearby amenities are becoming important. You keep employees by being close to home and being close to restaurants for lunch, et cetera. Third on the list is building quality. So that's just kind of interesting that whether you're in industrial or office space doesn't matter quite as much. So there's our office, or call center. Now we're sad. Market rent feasibility. Most market participants reported that rental rates need to be high 20s to low 30s or low 30s to mid 30s. So I'm just calling it 30 on an average. We do actually have the occupancy to build new. What we don't have is the rental rates. And here's the math, which you're totally excited about. Bust out your calculators. Estimated construction costs. I originally pulled from Marshall, and then I got a lot of comments back on pulling from Marshall might not be accurate, which I understand because Marshall is a national average. So I also spoke to 2 developers. Marshall indicates about 180 for general office, 205 for medical. And then I talked to 2 developers. For medical or for general office, we're 160 to 190 based on those developer estimates, and medical we're 190 to 215. Okay, so we're in the range of about 180 for general office, about 205 for medical office, and that's building cost. Okay, just the sticks. So when we're figuring out a feasibility rent, we have to do site acquisition costs. That $15 per square foot probably feels high. That's because it's based on per square foot of building area. So what I did was I estimate about $3 per square foot of land, 20% site coverage, okay? So here's the math for all you math geeks. $3 divided by 20% equals $15 per square foot of building area. Have I lost you? That's why that number's there, okay? Of course I haven't lost you, sorry, you're not 14. Okay, site work, about $25 a square foot, and then the construction costs from the first graph, about $180 for general, about $205 for medical. I tacked on a 20% entrepreneurial profit for the construction, and then when it came to rates of return, the general range I got from market participants was anywhere from 8 to 10. 8 is the low end of that range, but I decided to lean on the low end of that range since what I'm really looking for is a break point where our market rents need to be before we start building spec, okay? So there we have our base rental rate, $21.12 or $23.52 for medical. This does not take into account expenses. So I grossed it up to be a full service lease by adding about $9 a square foot, okay? The moral of this long math story is we're about $30 for general office and $32.50 for medical before we start building spec. These are numbers as of today. Construction costs are increasing. So 5-10 years from now, when our market is hot and we're ready to do the if you build it, they will come scenario, our rents are probably going to be closer to mid 30s. I asked pretty much everyone I talked to, when do you think we'll be ready for spec development? I got some tears. We don't know. For this project, I was asked to project 5 years into the future. I, based on market data, do not think we're going to be here in the next 5 years. This is a long ways out. Because as we know, I mean, our average call center rent, and call centers are hopping, is $21 a square foot. Our average rent across the market is less than $20 per square foot. So we have to see a 50% increase in rental rates before we can justify the cost to build. It doesn't help when I smile after, does it? Let's go back to good news. Okay, so we are making some recruiting efforts, right? Comcast came and re-envisioned retail space. Caterpillar's here. We kept Hexagon Mining. In fact, that's a success story for our recruiting efforts. Here are some of the agencies that work together. City of Tucson, Arizona Commerce Authority, Rio Nuevo District, who apparently just granted $19 million for Caterpillar, and Sun Corridor are all working to bring new business into Tucson. One success story that I got was Hexagon Mining was apparently threatening to leave. Hexagon. They didn't, because Sun Corridor came in and introduced them to Bourne, and Bourne companies put them in the building they needed. They stayed in Tucson. That's a win. What's not a win, this is where you get really mad at me. A lot of people that I spoke to, when I asked about this, and I didn't ask everyone the same questions, but the people that I did ask about this have suggested these groups do not work well together and do not work well with other local market participants. I'm sorry, I hope that's not the case. The one detail I got back is that we're a little bit too busy trying to take credit for wins than we are at trying to really bring wins into Tucson, and maybe should focus a little bit on who gets the thumbs up for it. I'm sorry. So I got really aggressive with some of you. And if you're one of those people, I apologize, and I hope you'll talk to me in the future. But when someone would say this to me, like, oh, we just don't work well together, really, like when? Give me an example. What happened? Nothing. I got nothing about that. And then I would get pushy. One broker made the mistake of telling me, oh, I could give an hour-long presentation on the ways we could work better together. Awesome. I have an hour. Tell me about it. He did not. Maybe because you guys were afraid I was going to rat you out like I am right now. So I don't have specifics. I wish I did. I don't know if there was a bad play in the recent past, if this is an ongoing issue, but we need collaboration between these groups, developers, brokers, etc. That is the general feel within the marketplace. And since I am, according to the CBRE harassment policy, not allowed to back someone into a corner and threaten to torture them, I don't know what the specifics are. So I'll leave that in your hands, okay? Sorry. Let's move on before I get in trouble again. Is the office user changing? Yes, it is. Some people are working remotely. This is actually not as big of a change as we were afraid of about 10 years ago. Everyone's going to be working from their house. No one's going to come to the office. Office space is going to be obsolete because we're all in our garages in our pajamas working. This hasn't happened. We've seen that people do prefer a collaborative environment to work with peers. I could work from home every single day. In fact, I work in my own little field on my own little jobs. I personally prefer to come into the office where there are other people, and I'm not the only one. People generally like to be in offices with other people. That being said, the ability to work remotely is there, and because of that, we need less space, okay? There are a couple things driving less space per less square footage per employee. We're loving this open floor plan idea right now, where everyone gets a tiny little cube and you have a laptop and you can come inside and plug your laptop wherever you want and work from any workstation. What that does is that eliminates space for family photos and storage and that kind of thing. People are willing to work in smaller space collaboratively, and there are fewer exterior offices. There's a decreasing desire for prominent office space. We're seeing this with the rising generation, especially in law firms and some medical. All right, I'm not the only one who watches law shows, right? We have the big prominent office with the sofa and the library and the little, bar over here where everyone drinks all day, which is fascinating to me. People don't need that anymore. The rising generation want to lower their costs and increase their revenue. What's also helping is that your big fat library is now online. You don't need to store all those books. You don't need to have a full living room operating as an office anymore. I asked a few people if we're still downsizing from the recession 10 years ago. For the most part, we have right-sized in the market. Most businesses are operating out of the correct size space for them. The exception to this is law firms that sign big, long leases. We're still seeing law firms downsize upon renewal. We just don't need as much space. Medical as well. Doctors are sharing space. You may spend 3 days up at this, 3 days up at this practice and 2 days down here, and what's happening is you're working out of the same office space as another doctor. You just bring in your computer, plug in. You don't need, again, the big living room type office, okay? Let's talk about some changes in medical care. Thanks to government medical care, the cost of operating a medical office went up. I'm sure most, if not all of you, are aware that a lot of doctors are leaving their private practices to join hospitals because the costs are just too high. So there is a fair amount of office space. What's happening is, like I was just mentioning, we share office space, right? If you have a private practice, you may work up at this location 3 days, down at this location 2 days, and there are multiple doctors within one suite. This is a way of reducing costs. Another way to reduce cost is shared office staffing. Arizona Community of Physicians, there we go, half cup of coffee. About 50 physicians, I believe is, no? Higher, more than 50. 150, my report has a typo. It is 150 providers are working in this network. And what they've done is they've consolidated clerical tasks, scheduling, human resources, billing, that kind of stuff no longer needs to be done out of the office. And what this is doing is giving a bump to our call center space, right? I mean, we have a huge Aetna building doing all sorts of clerical work, off-site for, yeah, please. Okay, sorry. So that's another way that we're reducing costs. One of the really cool things that's happening in medical right now is this urgent care space. We have a retailization of medical care. I'm sure you've noticed it, even if you haven't thought about it. Urgent cares are going into really prominent corner locations, high visibility, right? They're bringing medical to the patient. And they're lowering their costs in the process. One thing that's great about these urgent care centers, they are not required to take people without insurance. So they're recovering more of their costs on the back end. And a lot of people, because of this retailization, are preferring urgent care over the ER. If you break your finger and go to the ER, you may sit there for 4 hours. It's better to potentially go to urgent care where you can be seen quicker. No, I'm speaking from personal experience. I didn't want to go to the ER, right? My finger was throbbing, which is not a life-threatening issue. So we skip the ER, we go there. Also, urgent cares will see you on the weekends. So that's a little bit about medical. All right, let's wrap it up. I know. You guys are all bummed. Tucson's great. We all agree, right? Huzzah, Tucson. We have limited available product. We don't have very large floor plates. Caterpillar had to split in 2 before they're in their own building, et.cetera. The change in office users means change in office space. We're still calling Class A buildings stuff that was built a little while ago, but we're able to modify it. The focus for us needs to be on bringing new business in the market. This is the primary problem that I ran into, the coup de grace here. We don't have space. We don't have the rents to justify spec development. And I'm being told that nobody else wants to do what Comcast did or what Caterpillar is doing. But Comcast and Caterpillar are wins. And as long as we don't have spec product, which we don't, I am not advising anyone to build spec product, those kind of wins are probably what we need to be after in the near future. This is going to happen when we all work together like friends and do collaborative efforts with government organizations, brokers, developers. It's going to be a slow and steady growth. Probably a series of small wins. It would be great to be hitting home runs in Tucson. We probably just don't have the space. It's going to be Caterpillar, Raytheon expansion, Comcast, etc. So that's me. Thank you. Here's my phone number if you want to call and yell at me later. You can also send hate mail to that email address. Anyhow, I hope that was informative. I know I'm going to be on the panel later, and Michael's coming up to help me with my interpretive dance. So thank you for listening and for being here.